Hello, guys, and welcome to another episode of Strip the Dip Live. You're actually joining me, myself, Denzel Clark, aka AMG Dens, aka the modern day Morgan Freeman, today on this legendary episode that we're doing with the one and only very special Hazel Southwell. So make sure you guys write all the stuff in the comments. Make sure you guys put your interactive questions inside there. Make sure that you interact as much as possible as well, as you're going to be joining us for this really cool episode. And yeah, I'm so excited to actually interview Hazel. Hazel's a really amazing person on Twitter. She's got some amazing content centered around, like, Formula E, around the technology, the hybrid cars as well. She's done some amazing work with the likes of race fans as well, and also motorsport, and also loads of cool different motorsport media organizations as well. So guys, get your comments inside there and say hello. Make sure you get your questions inside there, as we're going to be touching on lots of different questions and areas from this week. But Hazel, how are you doing, most importantly of all?
I'm good. Mostly trying to kind of assume that everything I've packed for Le Mans is fine. I'm accepting my fate in a kind of like, I've left my tent in a Schrodinger's. It might have been eaten by moths since 2019. It might not have.
Ooh.
We won't know for sure until I open the bag, and like, I can't do anything about it at this point. So but no, excited. It's obviously been an amazing few weeks for motorsport, with so much going on, especially that it's going to be the 100th Le Mans this weekend.
I know, like, it's a really special kind of time in history, and in terms of motorsport, you talked about Le Mans as well. We've got a revival of the LMDH class as well, with a Cadillac, with a Ferrari, with a Peugeot. So it's not just Toyota dominance as per the usual we've come to expect in the last couple of years or so. But absolutely, Hazel, it's really exciting. And on top of that, on the topic of excitement, we've just come off the back end of another race weekend for the Formula E guys, which you also have a lot of insight and awesome experiences to share with us at Jakarta. So we'll be touching on that, and also just in the world of Formula One and just generally this motorsport on the whole is in such an exciting place compared to where it's been in the last couple of years as well. So absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, before we get into the fan kind of comments, we bring those in as well. Hazel, for our listeners and for our viewers tuning in, please give us an insight into like what you do, kind of what your passions are, and what were your earliest motorsport memories before the really cool and awesome stuff you do now.
So my earliest motorsport memory is, for ages I thought it was the 1993 San Marino Grand Prix, but it turns out it wasn't, and I can't remember which one it actually was. But there was a race where Ayrton Senna was on pole, and I loved Senna, partly because I thought he was a girl. And like, you have to remember that 1993, the broadcast was not what it is now. There was not high definition onboard cameras and stuff. And also I lived in kind of rural Britain, so the signal was always kind of coming in and out on a cathode ray telly. But when I was like 6, 7, I briefly thought Senna was a girl, and I can't remember what happened, but Nigel Mansell won, and I hated that because I didn't like his moustache.
I was going to say, you're not a fan of the tash.
Real insights there. I was definitely early on the analysis and
the aerodynamic properties of Nigel Mansell's mustache. A 10-mark question. But no, that's super cool. And tell us more. You've also quite involved with the Formula E side of stuff as well, and also the technical side of things as well. So, like, please tell us more.
Yeah, so I've worked in journalism for a long time, and also different bits of, but different, not motorsport journalism, for quite a lot of my career, and then also worked in motorsport, but not in journalism. So it's kind of like comes from a few angles. But basically, around the time that Formula One hit what is called full hybrid, it moved from KERS to ERS. And it's still a very mild hybrid, but it's considered a bigger one. Because it was pathetically small as a percentage before. But and at the same time Formula E appeared, I realized there was a lot of people had a lot of questions about the hybrid stuff, and no one was really talking about it, and no one was really talking about the battery technology. And I've always been interested in like mechanical stuff and cars and tech. So it was sort of, it came at a point when I was working for the BBC, actually at Radio 1. And at that point, you were not allowed to, you could not tweet anything political at all. You couldn't post anything on any form of social media that was political if you worked there, because you would have Daily Mail journalists all over you. That it was biased, that it was like, and it was like really serious, that this could like not just endanger your job, it could endanger like projects that you worked on and stuff. So I found myself kind of talking more about these tech bits and motorsport and stuff that I hadn't necessarily engaged with online before, because to be honest, no one was really talking about it online. Like there were about 10 of us in F1 Twitter at the time, and I think we all still know each other. But yeah, well, apart from the Lotus admin who got fired. But yeah, I kind of realized that there was an audience for this, and that people were interested in it, and also that I was really interested in it on a level that I hadn't necessarily sort of realized before, because like, you know, cars for the majority of my lifetime have been mostly combustion. And so yeah, kind of got into it from that angle. And then particularly Formula E, because Formula One, one of the reasons I'd never even considered being a motorsport journalist is I had no idea how you would do that. Like, I think for the vast majority of us, unless you have like a family member or like a existing connection to motorsport, it's just like, well, how would I get anywhere near that? And especially this was, you know, like prior to the content era, so it wasn't, there was no like immediately obvious way of doing anything. And so yeah, I kind of, Formula E was considerably more open than Formula One. Like it was just easier to get into and sort of find a way into. So I spent quite a long time working in Formula One, but covering Formula E, which is like a slightly odd way of doing it, because a lot of people would be like, oh, will you be trying to like work in Formula One? But yeah. And then these days I kind of cover everything, but particularly a technical angle. So like everything through to battery chemistries, particularly sustainable technologies and things like, you know, sustainable composites or tire makeup. And I mean, like, I'm writing a lot about drought at the minute, which might sound like it's not particularly connected to cars, but then we did have the floods in Imola. So, yeah, there's a lot of interconnected stuff, or like, I guess, holistic stuff to it.
Absolutely, you know, and to be fair as well, is we love the amazing content that you put out, you know, in relation to the kind of really technical stuff to do with the cars and the composites and the kind of technology, you know, with the hybrid and also electric systems that they use these days as well. Also, one of my favorite videos by yourself has to be like the cheese comparison of the W13, like the aerodynamic composites of the front wing on a Mercedes W13, and why Mercedes kind of chiseled out the rear wing, which is a legendary video. Like, if no one's seen that, I implore you to go and check that out. It's a really classic one for me.
I'll retweet it or something. Yeah, it was, I think, yeah, Chain Bear said I should explain it with cheese, and I got in 6 glasses of wine down and was like, this is the perfect moment to do this for some reason.
Honestly, it was great, like, and I think really creative as well. And some of us are visual learners, so even as like crazy as that sounds, it really does kind of resonate with some people more. So, you know, by all means, let's bring more cheese. But you know, let's look at some of the comments you got as well. So we've got Abby in the building. Hey, Abby, which is my amazing girlfriend. She's actually sitting right next to me. Hence why I have also Angry Bowser monitoring me behind the two. So big shout out to little Bow Wow. We also have RVD in the building. What's going on, RVD? Hope you're keeping well, and thank you for joining us. You've got a really good question, which I'm actually going to come back to for my little smooth segue. So I'll come back to that. And then we have Sir Blag in the building as well. Evening, Blag. Thank you so much for joining us. And absolutely, to be fair, Hazel, let's kind of kick it off with RVD's question, which I was going to get to, but I mean, we can address it earlier, is how can Formula E grow is following to the next level, in terms of you have like the really old kind of like rich upper class guys that say, "Oh well, Formula One's the pinnacle, and I have a Rolex, and no. That's my best impersonation of them.
It's pretty spot on. I won't lie.
Well, thank you. I'm flattered. But there's been so many different other motorsport series, which whether it's more conventional stuff like IndyCar, where we've seen really close racing, and vice versa, even in the world of Formula E, with like the plethora of drivers we have there, from Pascal Wehrlein, the likes as well of Max Günther, which has also had a really impressive performance we'll talk about in a second too. And just with that style of racing, not only is it, the kind of mechanical side of obviously the cars and the tires and how they interact, but also having the electrical systems, having the fan boost, having those kind of bits as well. And before I segue it to you, Hazel, just like, it's really amazing that they've made it free to air. They've given fans the opportunity to actually watch it and actually, tick the boxes in terms of actually trying to engage with it. Whereas I think for some people, Formula One and other series, it almost feels like a barrier to trade in terms of subscriptions and almost like it not being free to air like it maybe was back in the day. So yeah, Hazel, your thoughts on that? How can Formula E grow, in terms of going to the next level?
So Formula E, it's really strange actually, because when Formula E first appeared, it was basically the only motorsport that did anything online. It was literally pretty much the only, Formula One had a Twitter feed, but it was basically an RSS of stuff posted to the website, and almost nothing was posted to the website. It was wild, like in retrospect, because Bernie just didn't give stuff about the internet. And he thought it was completely pointless and redundant, and particularly social media. The teams went on social. There wasn't really, like a few of the drivers used it, but it was sort of regarded as like, oh, that's Lewis doing something or like whatever. And there really wasn't like a presence for motorsport on social media or even online at large. And a lot of that was to do with, the broadcasting rights for Formula One are intensely locked down. You couldn't use any content. There was nothing being put out. There was nothing to engage with. So, because F1 don't own their own broadcasting rights, they're owned by the broadcasters, which is to the point that F1 occasionally get like a takedown notice on their videos, and you notice it sometimes. They sort of flash in and out of existing. But yeah, the Formula E initially, like that 2014-15 season and through to 16-17, they kind of had it locked down because they were the only people who were doing anything. And okay, things like fan boost were kind of, because I know a lot of people are like, oh, it's gimmicky, it's dorky, like whatever. It's never really had any effect on racing. Apart from the one time that like Sebastian Buemi tried to activate it and span himself into a wall whilst jet lagged in Mexico. But which genuinely, I think that is the only time it's like had a significant effect. But the Formula E, as a consequence of fan boost, all the teams were incentivized to get on social media and to start trying to reach fans and to start trying to get people to engage with them. The drivers were incentivized to go out and do it. There was this big sudden push to be like, you need to be online and you actually need to think about this and you need to do stuff. And it also rolled out fan pages, fan groups. So there'd be Facebook groups that people ran. A lot of people who are now like quite established in the industry came from the Formula E fan pages. And there was a big push to get this audience that just wasn't being engaged with at all on other motorsport or by other motorsport. And Formula E would post really great, like weird little video clips, like throwing the cars into Mario Kart and doing strange things and like doing all this social media stuff that even it had like a really great April Fools in 2016, which was that the steering wheel would let drivers and engineers send each other emojis to express what they were feeling, which obviously I feel like the poop emoji might get quite a workout.
Yeah.
But a lot of the time, but yeah, they just it was like funny and clever, and it was the kind of thing where even if people weren't necessarily watching the racing, a lot of people were seeing the social media. And then it sort of fell off a cliff in like 2019. And it was obvious that the social media admins were working with nothing anymore. So where there'd been this like obvious investment in like video content, in stuff that hadn't been being done by other series, particularly Formula One at the time, there was suddenly like they were just having to use text posts. The imagery that they were using on Instagram or whatever was not particularly. Sometimes it was very obvious there was no one at the track, and like it just sort of fell off, and it's a real shame because I genuinely think there is a point where it had this rolling kind of momentum, and like 2020 was very bad for Formula E. If you are a racing series that is based around city centres and lockdown is on, that's pretty rough. Like,
Mm.
there's not a lot you can really do about that. And the Berlin finale, although it was a plan to finish the season, which at the time when it was interrupted looked impossible, it was also dire in terms of like no one watched it. Like, you know, having 6 races in 9 days and back to back, it's like it's not. Some of them midweek, and both of the weekends were F1 clashes, I think, by then, because F1 was kind of rolling out the calendar by that point. And yeah, that was a very tough year for Formula E. But since then, it hasn't really recovered, and the audience. It's painful for me as a journalist because no one reads Formula E articles, so they're really hard to pitch. Like, you basically have to hope that your editor has never previously published a Formula E article and therefore does not know how badly it's going to perform. But yeah, there's very little interest, and that's reflected in the audience sizes. You know, Formula E had an audience smaller than W Series in 2021, I think. And that's a very short championship that's a junior series, whereas Formula E is a world championship, which at the time I think had 7 manufacturers in. You know, including big ones like Mercedes and Porsche and things. And yeah, I think all Formula E really needs is to re-engage that audience, to make it feel relevant, to make people feel passionate about who wins, because you know, stuff like the interest that's driven in Formula One at the minute, a lot of it is about the drivers' personalities, and it's about the teams, and it's about, you know, being a McLaren fan, or my sympathies to fellow Williams fans. Although their social is so good at the minute, actually. Formula E need to sort themselves out like that. But yeah, there's so much stuff that Formula E could do that would be relatively easy. It's not even particularly complicated things. It's stuff like putting out your own podcast. I don't know why they don't have one. And things like regularly updating stuff, just not leaving things dormant for ages, and like trying, even things like stuffing some paid promotion behind its YouTube videos would do a huge amount. Like Formula E put out a documentary that Alejandro had funded. Part of it was Leonardo DiCaprio. Hollywood documentary. I'm not saying this because I'm in it. Like, I didn't get paid or whatever, but like it's a high quality documentary, and it ended up on YouTube because they were looking for a cinematic release. They were looking for it to go out on broadcasters, whatever. Ended up on YouTube in lockdown, and they didn't put any paid spend behind it. And I'm like, but you've spent so much on this documentary. Why isn't there like a bit behind it? So yeah, it's all just a case of being bold, and you
Yeah.
know, Sky F1 put paid promotion. They had their tweets are promoted into my timeline all the time, even though I've already seen them because I follow them. And like Formula One put paid promotion behind things. Like, I don't know why there's this squeamishness to try and play the algorithms,
Mhm.
because a lot of them do demand it. But yeah, it's and then some of it is just finding ways to actually communicate more about the series as it is, because
Sure.
you know, Formula E will say something like, well, we had 116 overtakes during the Monaco E-Prix, and there were like however many in the Grand Prix, and famously there's been a couple of years where there was one on track, or none, and like, that's great, it's a great stat, but
Mhm.
it doesn't actually particularly tell you anything about the racing. And if
Sure.
you can't conceive of what 116 overtakes around Monaco would even look like, then it's like, well, it's because you've got silly little cars, isn't it? Like it doesn't. You have to contextualize things and make the cell more coherent, because
Sure.
actually most people, if they watch it, are like, oh, that's quite fun. But yeah, there's a lot of there's just a lot of communication that needs to take place for people to enjoy it.
I think that's a really fair and honest analysis as well there, Hazel. And I agree, you know, it's like the foundations of the house are there, but in terms of actually kind of putting things together and constructing them and actually doing the physical part of it, it seems like there's still a bit to be pushed on there. So, you know, I'm really hopeful that that will continue to grow. Obviously, they have amazing people like you, which obviously, you know, week in, week out, you know, give us the coverage, give us kind of your own perception, and build that kind of bridge that we always talk about on here, you know, in terms of the sport and then the fans themselves, you know. And to move the conversation along, I've got a question from F1 Black, but I'll ask it on my third one because I think it's more relevant and similar for RVD's next question as well. But on to the next topic, you know, a review of the Jakarta Grand Prix itself. It seemed like it was quite an interesting one, you know, with the likes of Max Gunter getting the W, as well as that for Maserati, which again, are they new brand for this year? Because
They
even
are,
for myself,
yes, yeah, they are. So they are part of the automaker Megazord that is
okay,
Stellantis, which is
it's
the
like Peugeot and
uncomfortable divorcee child situation of the Fiat Chrysler group and the Peugeot group being kind of sat round the same dinner table for Christmas and staring at
yeah,
each other. You know, so you've got Jeep looking at Citroen and both of them being like, so yeah, the for some reason I now get Jeep press releases in French, which Le Ronglais is really like just a truly bizarre concept to me. But yeah, Maserati rebranded a little bit in the same way that Alfa Romeo rebranded Sauber in Formula One. They rebranded Vauntry as Maserati, so it's the Vauntry team, but with Maserati colors on it, pretty much. And then they're using the Stellantis powertrain, which is the one that was developed by the DS team.
Oh, okay. And I think John-Eric Verne was part of that team.
Yes, yeah. So most of the development took place while DS was attached to Cheetah, and then DS as a brand is now attached to Penske. So, which was Dragon. It's all very confusing.
This is it. See, this is what we like though, Hazel, because it's like teams almost have dynasties. And you know, when I think of Penske, I'm immediately thinking of that Porsche project they're running in the LMDH class, or I'm thinking of Joseph Newgarden like gulping some milk down at the Indy 500. So just to have names like that even associated in Formula E, I wish was something that they'd more sell us, because immediately
it is the wrong Penske is the thing.
Oh,
so those two are Roger, the kind of glorious American racing and the owner of IndyCar and whatever. The Penske in Formula E is Jay, who is his son, who is actually like, he's very successful as a magazine owner, like Vanity Fair and Rolling Stone and stuff.
Mhm.
So yeah, I mean that's nothing against him as a team principal. He's a bit of an erratic personality, but yeah, they're it's a shared surname, but not the same person.
Person.
Or I
Well,
guess it's a literal dynasty, actually, in the sense he is Roger's son.
exactly, and again, we see similar things like that across motorsports as well. So it's interesting to kind of see that. And then also, in terms of the race itself, Jean-Eric Verne, my guy, unfortunately not having the best day. Nick Cassidy as well, also having not the best day. Pascal Wehrlein, though, which again I remember from the Formula One days when he was at Manor. Gosh, how do I remember that? Having a really great time is it the Porsche Formula E team?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
again, amazing to see a manufacturer like Porsche in there as well. But the question I was going to ask you, Hazel, is what was happening with, Dan, and I've rebranded his name from TikTok because he really was having a meltdown on camera. Just what was going on behind the wheel? What was behind the angry radio message? And to the fans out there, could you explain what derating is when it comes to like a hybrid or electrical system?
Yes, so deracing is basically the battery stops functioning. It is the easiest way of explaining it. It's something that happens at the extremes of thermal endurance for the battery. Particularly, and in racing, you tend to see it when it's massively overheating. So what happens? You hear them talk about it occasionally in Formula One as well, and it's generally a temperature thing. Sometimes it's an electrical thing. But usually it's because the battery is basically cooking, and so it looks like it has no charge. Basically because it can't produce charge because it's in a state where it effectively no energy is going to come out of this thing, or it's intermittent, or so that's probably a bad explanation, but it sort of gets across what's going on with it. And what Dan experienced at the end of the race was something that has happened to loads of drivers, actually. Like Jev Impact has had this in New York, I think. New York is a really hot race, and it used to be at the end of the season, so batteries really at the limit of their life. Really hot, really humid, and it would often be like the final stress, particularly for the Gen 1 batteries. But like we see it quite a lot in Formula E. It is something that happens during hot races, where the thermal management is super, super crucial. And Jakarta, of course, is like, I mean, if you saw them when they got out of the cars, the guys look like they've just waddled out of sauna, and like, because it's true. Like they've just been sitting in effectively like 50, 60 degree heat with very little airflow for, the duration of a race where they're hauling a car with no power steering. So like it's hard work. So yeah, he hit that thermal limit. He had been warned about over consuming, so I think he was probably being forced to do a lot of regen, which obviously you're stressing the battery and the inverter and the powertrain more and more, because because every time you kind of reverse the flow, like charging creates heat, discharging creates heat, and so he effectively had no energy across the line. He lost a lot of places. That's very upsetting, but it's something that happens. Like I say, it is something that's happened to other drivers, and his response was to be honest, I actually feel flat out abusive to his team, in a way that I would be shocked to hear if a driver talk to their team like that after they've been really screwed over. Like if you compare Daniel Ricciardo's radio message after that Monaco Grand Prix where he got properly robbed of the win, to that message where it was nothing to do with the team. They were giving him the information, but also in Formula E, the driver has more information than the pit wall. So actually that thermal management is stuff that you have to do yourself. So the pit wall basically has the state of charge of the battery and some temperature information about the powertrain and the battery, but it's not it's like for emergency
Sure.
stuff. But all of the other bits have to be managed by the driver. And yes, that's really difficult. It's why Formula E is very interesting, very difficult motorsport.
Sure.
But he went off on this tirade. And look, Dan is known for this. And I know that like, particularly when he was in Formula 2, people picked up that his radio was being broadcast more than other people's. A lot of drivers kind of go off on one, especially in Formula 2 when they're, young and emotionally volatile. And yeah, maybe it was unfair a few times. I actually used to, when he was putting his foot in his mouth and just saying things where I was like, God, shut up, Dan. Just delete the audio when I'd interviewed him, because I was just like, there's no point playing into this.
Mm-hmm.
And it is easy to criticize him for being volatile. He clearly isn't particularly well regulated emotionally. A lot of us aren't. And yeah, but I think there's a difference between being very upset and being, maybe angry or at the car or yourself, or, we've heard drivers very emotional on the radio and just being outright nasty to your team, which I actually feel... I mean, it would be a bit extreme to throw the FIA International Sporting Code at him, but you could.
Yeah.
Not in a way that would... I don't think he should lose his drive or face a big penalty or something, but maybe some community service or something. I don't really think it's acceptable. If you are in a world championship, which Formula E is, it is considered top-level single-seaters, whether people rank it alongside other championships or not. I think there is a bit of a responsibility to set a better example. And when drivers have gone on big rants before, obviously, most notably Sebastian Vettel's rant at Charlie Whiting, then they have faced a bit of pushback to go and, do something and change their ways.
Sure. And like you said as well, I agree, at the end of the day, whilst these drivers are human and everyone kind of has their off day, I have many frustrating days behind the sim getting punted by MDH drivers. There still is a level of respect and courtesy you have to have for people, and especially when you're at such a high level that you mentioned. Formula E is still considered an FIA regulated world championship, so you're gonna have kids watching it as well, which look up to these drivers, and if they see stuff like that, then it's not necessarily a great look for the sport, not a great look for the sponsors, and not really a great kind of selling kind of point of a driver, especially of Dan's kind of background as well. So I agree. I think, maybe there is kind of some underlining understanding there, but at the same time, he needs to conduct himself maybe in a more civil way and kind of take maybe a step back, so yeah, 100%.
Just don't hold down the radio button whilst you're saying it.
True, and we'll never know.
You can just let go of that button and run into your helmet and no one will ever know.
Absolutely. Well, on the topic of Dan cooling down with his battery, let's get into the next topic, which is sustainability in motorsport, because we've had some really great questions on this already. We've actually had F1 Blag ask, do you think electric vehicles become a dominant type of road car? So he's talking more about the technology from racing getting transferred into passenger vehicles, and also just what's your take on it, Hazel, in terms of what captivated you in relation to Formula E and on the emphasis on sustainability in terms of the drivetrains, the way that the power is generated? How fundamentally advanced would you say a Formula E car is compared to a F1 car in terms of the regen and almost the sustainable aspect of it? And kind of to circle back to Black's point as well, could we actually see stuff like this in modern day road cars? Because we have modern day kind of electric cars, but there's still that kind of phase of, do we have the supplies, and the facilities to charge them? And also, do some electric cars give off more of a gimmicky vibe? Whereas, if you can attach it with a particular motorsport marquee, like Aston Martin or, in Formula E terms, Porsche, Maserati, how much crossover could we actually see in the potential future?
Yeah, so it's really interesting actually. Formula E does directly transfer into road cars, and people might be surprised by that because it's a spec chassis. So it's not as though teams are doing huge amounts of chassis development. There is a bit of composite work, and they do develop some parts of the car like brake ducts and stuff. Brake ducts, they're so exciting in all motorsport. But obviously the powertrain is very important, and the programming for the powertrain and managing the battery is very important. It's partly why I think Formula E should not move to any form of battery wars. Partly because, to be honest, OEMs do not make batteries. Samsung and LG make batteries, or Cattle and or CATL, not cows. And there's not that development is not taking place in OEMs. But also because whilst they're forced to use the same battery, they have to get clever with the way that they manage it. So and at the end of the day, the battery is just like F1 being told to start with 110 kilograms of fuel. Like it is what it is. So and actually a lot of the fuel system in F1 is spec now. But yeah, the technology that manages the regen in particular is a huge win for Formula E, and I wish they would talk about this more. So there is now a potential 600 kilowatts of regen on the Gen 3 car. That is huge, gigantic. It's about double what any road car has at the moment, and the most extreme road car is the Mercedes EQS, which has 295 or 97, I can't remember, kilowatts of regen at a maximum. The vast majority of road cars have between 70 to 90 kilowatts of regen, which is basically the same as the first Toyota Prius, and it's not hugely upped. You're now seeing numbers go way over 100. You're seeing it reach 150. 150 was the first season of Formula E. And then, it went to 250 in Gen 2, and now you're seeing so much bigger. And that is a miracle in terms of battery management, because that was the concern, was like you just can't take that much power back. It's much more power than Formula 1 regens because the limitation on what you can use and how much you can harvest from the MGUK is so severe. A lot of the braking energy is just lost to heat in Formula 1 because you're not allowed to do anything with it. So it's an incredible miracle, and because regen is the technology that is going to be the range extension for electric road cars. So if you want to bring down battery size, which we do, that's really important to make lighter cars, to make less resource intensive cars, then you need to be extending that range by managing it with regen, and stop worrying about, okay, so you start with 54 kilowatt hours, that's 104 miles or something. Yeah, I'm inventing a road car there. I don't think that's the figure for any of them. But okay, that might be the number of miles you could initially get out of that. But actually, if you can regenerate another 50%, then that figure changes radically. And it is, between 40 to 60% of the energy during a Formula E race that is from regen. So it's actually more than they sort of start with. So that's incredible. And it literally goes into road cars. Jaguar took the braking techniques that Mitch and Sam use and put it into software that tells the driver in a mild hybrid car, sort of, it suggests kind of like you could start braking now if you want to kind of do things, or you can start lifting and doing stuff. And in their plug-in hybrids, actually just directly manages the system and does it itself. So they took that regen behavior that they'd learned in Formula E and used it to add like a significant percentage of electric range to these cars. It like, I think 10% on the plug-in hybrids, And again, like, that is super important. If we can take those incremental range extensions, and those are things that can go into cars that are already on the road,
Sure.
because you can just make a software update because it's software based.
Mhm.
And that's not particularly sexy. I realize people are like, yeah, but like, where's the cool front wing and like stuff that you can do like a Scarbs Tech circle round. But in terms of actually like things OEMs want, that is something they want to develop. That is a useful thing that Motorsport is developing, and there's not that many places other than on track that you can push limits of regen like that and get that data in a responsive way. Especially because Formula E races on actual street surfaces. It's not using slicks. It's much more similar to a road car, even though it doesn't look like one at all. Then it kind of appears. And yeah, the sustainability. I mean, Formula E ham it up a bit, and at the end of the day, it is a racing series, and it's not. In a way, none of its activities are strictly necessary to combating climate change. You know, at the end of the day, it's not planting seagrass or something, but it is developing technology that will help us, especially because. Yeah, so to answer F1 Blag's question about the dominant propulsion mechanism for road cars, yeah, I think you will see some of that. I at the moment, I think the car industry is in a very difficult place,
Sure.
partly because, if we were perfectly honest with ourselves, the future of cars is that there aren't very many cars, which is not something that a multi-billion-dollar industry wants to hear. But in terms of what will be sold, yes, it is moving to battery electric. There's currently no efficient way to make hydrogen on a green scale. Almost 96% of hydrogen is generated from fossil fuels, so it's sort of a bust. And it uses more electricity than you get out in energy from hydrogen. And it also needs a lot of rare earth metals for fuel cells and stuff. You need platinum and ruthenium, and to generate it, you need iridium, which is like it's all a bit of a mess, and doesn't solve the batteries problem. Whereas batteries, actually, hopefully, if we move towards sodium chemistry, then we can see something a lot more efficient and a lot more environmentally viable. Which that's not on the never in the same way that like solid state is. There are cars with sodium batteries now. So yeah, there will be fewer vehicles, but the efficiency of battery electric is pretty hard to replicate with anything else, basically.
Sure. I think that's a really great answer, Hazel. And I think it does kind of give us that kind of insight as well into life, into the future, as well as you mentioned that cool point about Jaguar taking some of the driving techniques from the actual drivers and implementing it in the road cars too, for example, to encourage people to lift and coast, or to, like to yield, or to brake earlier. And like you mentioned as well, like there's different variants there are as well. I mean, with hydrogen, it's always been talked about, but like you mentioned too, in a practical kind of sense, in day to day, it seems quite hard to kind of make it feasible. And even just in racing series, I remember, I think in the Le Mans Asia series, they're running a hydrogen car in its own class, and performance wise, it was well off the pace of the other kind of conventional cars.
Yeah, it's a very low energy fuel is the problem. So even in a combustion engine, also if you run it hot in a combustion engine, then it creates particulates similar to diesel. So it's, although it's in theory a clean burn, it doesn't actually, and it doesn't output very much. And then you're looking at sort of like 32% efficiency from the hydrogen as you made it from electrolysis, assuming you made it from electrolysis, which is pretty atrocious kind of return. I'm really sorry, but I'm going to have to go because I'm really worried about missing my train.
Sure. Well, I mean, Hazel, thank you for today's episode, because it means a lot to us. And also, we'll definitely have to have you back on for another episode. As you actually are going, can you tell our listeners just about your Le Mans experience coming up and just how it came about?
Yeah, so apparently I bought myself a ticket to Le Mans at some point, and I then forgot it for 4 months because I thought I wasn't going, and then got an email going like, "You need to submit your proof of green transport," and I was like, "My what?" So this is why I'm, instead of firing up the Twingo, going to get the train, because I have to get there by green means for this sustainable ticket, a reduced price. A really good incentive actually, because Le Mans has great public transport links. The TGV is an hour from Paris, and there's a tram directly to the track. So yeah, it's a great initiative to get people, because a huge amount of the emissions of Le Mans are everyone descending on the site. So yeah, great initiative. I'm super excited to be going. And yeah.
Well, Hazel, listen, we'll have to have another episode with you to kind of like have a catch up,
Yeah.
see how it was. The 100th, you know, like event of the Le Mans as well, which is really special. And before you go, Hazel, where can they find you? You know, because you're a gem of knowledge to us all, and actually, it's been a pleasure for me even just catching up with you as well, and just learning more into the world of Formula E and this, you know, sustainability as well in motorsport. So where can our listeners find you?
It was great speaking to you. Yeah, this has been really fun. So probably the easiest place is Twitter, where I'm H Southwell FE. And yeah, there's a lot of chemistry nonsense on my feed at the minute, because I'm doing some silly things with lithium carbonate. So yeah.
Awesome. Well, Hazel, we'll let you go. I'm gonna round off the show, but you're more than free to leave, and we'll catch up with you off stream as well. But thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you so much, and yeah, have a great evening, everyone. And yeah, sorry for running off.
It's okay. Well, guys, that was our very special and esteemed guest, Hazel Southwell. So, you know, it was really awesome actually to just catch up to her and, you know, listen to some of the stuff she was talking about in terms of Formula E as a sport, as a product, as a sustainable movement for the future, to kind of hear how the manufacturers are doing as well. And yeah, just generally speaking, just like how awesome just things are on that side too. So hopefully we'll be able to get Hazel on for a future episode. You know, there's some other questions we had lined up. Didn't quite get to ask them today. But yeah, huge shout out to everyone that's been here, from Abby to RVD to F1 Blag as well. I know her mug was extremely funny as well. Not piss. I hope it wasn't piss. I hope it was some other sustainable juice or drink. Let's put it that way, Blag. But yeah, you know, it's been your boy AMG Dens. You know, I'm here from the streets of North London, bringing you another Strip to Dip live. We've actually got another one towards the end of the month as well, with another amazing kind of guest, that is Sabra Cook from the Porsche division as well. Hopefully she'll turn up and give us some more gems of knowledge in her journeys as a racing driver. But yeah, guys, thank you so much. Make sure you slap that like button like Will Smith, like I always say on my stream. And yeah, you know, for me, a little bow wow. I'll catch you guys soon. Take it easy. Thank you.